What's going on, guys? Danny Matei back with Caffeine and Cash Practices, and we're here to help you grow and scale your cash practice, whatever your niche is. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can go to your first 100K in annual gross revenue with one simple marketing strategy. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm the founder of PT Biz. PT Biz is a company that helps cash practices both grow and scale, and this first 100K is an area that we've helped over 500 practices grow to over $100,000 in revenue, and honestly, never have to work with someone else the rest of their life, which is pretty crazy to think about. Now, here's where I think people get really concerned and frustrated, and it's where they stop in their tracks. And there's two big areas, and one of them we're gonna talk about today. But the first one is, how do I get patients? And the second one is, how do I get them to pay me money, right? So how do I get patients? That is marketing. How do I get them to pay me money? Well, that's sales. And we're gonna talk about that in another video. But today we're talking about a super simple strategy. And I'll give you a really good scenario to use this as an example as well, to where you can go from just starting a practice, typically, let's call it as a side hustle. Maybe you're doing this on the side and still working full time, especially if you have a family. It's probably your best strategy. It's far less stressful. It's more work for you to kind of have two things to do at once, but it's really helpful to be able to grow your side hustle and then be able to make the leap into doing this thing full time. So in order to do that though, you have to have patience. You have to have revenue coming in. And we're gonna do some quick math here just to help out. So let's say you're getting to $100,000 in annual revenue and you're charging $200 a visit. And this is maybe above, maybe below where you're gonna be, but for my math purposes, this is gonna help me. So if you're charging $200 and you need to get to 100,000, that means you have to see 500 patient visits in the course of that year, which is a little over 40 a month, right? So if we really think about that, so let's say it's about 40 a month is where you need to be. That's basically 10 visits a week. And it's not 10 new people, by the way. That's 10 sessions a week, 10 visits that you have to accumulate in order to get to that point. So when we really do the math on it, it doesn't sound all that challenging, right? It doesn't sound impossible by any means. But even still, it's scary to think about, well, how do I get these people in the door? Because honestly, the first 20, 25 patients that you have to kind of get into your office, that's the hardest 25 patients you'll ever have to get in the door. And if you do a really good job with them, well, they'll be advocates for life, right? So how do you do this? What is the best way to go? And you can go on YouTube like you are here. You can listen to 500 podcasts that I've put out on the PT Entrepreneur podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you like, and you can consume all this content, and there's all these different strategies, and it can get very complex, and sometimes it can be very confusing, right? Because you're looking at, okay, do I do SEO? Do I do Google ads? Do I do Facebook ads? Should I start a YouTube channel? Do I do Instagram messaging? Do I do content on TikTok? What should I do? Well, I'm gonna make it very simple for you and hopefully take some of the stress out of the equation. And here's all you have to do. And if you focus on this, the likelihood of you getting to $100,000 in gross revenue is very high over a long enough timeline. Let me preface that. This is not gonna happen in a month. Okay, you're not gonna be at a $100,000 run rate in a month. You might, but you may also have some pre-existing relationships and things that are gonna help you get there. I'm assuming, let's just say, you're kind of new to the area, maybe new to this niche that you want to be a part of, versus, oh, I know everybody in this niche and you're gonna have a ton of business from day one because you've built that over a long period of time. So that's gonna happen faster. But if you're trying to strip this down and make this super simple and not trying to crack the Facebook, YouTube, Instagram algorithm, here's what you need to do. One strategy. You need to pick a niche that you wanna be a part of, and then you need to be a part of that niche. Let me say that one more time. You need to pick a niche that you want to be a part of, and then you need to actually be a part of that community, okay? It's pretty much that simple. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. First of all, you have to decide what niche you really like working with, and that comes down to a couple factors, all right? It's, first of all, can that niche afford to pay for your services, right? And they don't have to be an affluent niche by any means. You don't have to target just like, entrepreneurs with 7-figure businesses. It could be literally runners, triathletes, CrossFitters, recreational soccer players, anybody that is, within a niche of any sort. Golf, women's health, many, many different niches that work within the cash world. But what you have to then do is decide, okay, this niche can afford it. Can I help them? Right? Because I might say, okay, I love the women's health niche, but for me personally, I've never treated a women's health patient. I have no credentials to do so whatsoever. And I honestly just don't really have any interest in it. There's people that love it and that's what they do. And that's just not my niche, right? So even though it might be a good opportunity, like, do you like working with those people? And can you get them better? So can they afford it? Do you like working with them? And can you get them better? Because if those don't match up, let's say the women's health example, for instance, let's say that they can afford it. Let's say that you have the skill set to work with them, but you don't like it. You just don't like that type of a niche. Maybe you're into something else. Then you shouldn't go for that because you need to be interested in the niche. Like, have you ever heard the phrase, you need to be interested in other people before they can be interested in you? That's what you have to do. You have to show that you are, I wouldn't say obsessive, but borderline obsessive of that niche, trying to help that niche, be a part of that community, be an advocate for that niche. And I'll give you an example as far as one of the niches that we work a lot with, which is runners. I think runners, the running community is a great niche. And I'll also give you an example of why I didn't really double down on that. So when I was in the Army as a physical therapist, the vast majority of what I saw was running related injuries. It was a huge percentage of what we saw. And it's because they run a lot in the Army, and most people, they don't actually program the volume very well. They're typically terrible runners. They've had no training on the technique of running. So we see a lot of those injuries. And even though I've worked with over literally thousands of runners, I'm not super interested in the running niche. I don't like to run myself. I don't really enjoy working with runners. I don't find it all that mentally challenging. I'm not a huge fan of breaking down running form, and it's just not my thing. So could I work with them? For sure. Is it a niche that can afford it? Yes. But is it something that I find interesting? No. And that wasn't the niche that I went after. So on the flip side of that, when I moved to Atlanta, the niche that I was really interested in at the time was CrossFit. And here's why. I was working with CrossFit teams that were competitive as their doc. I'd gone to the CrossFit games, working with those teams. I've been training competitively in Hawaii for years. I really got into Olympic lifting and was fascinated with the biomechanics of Olympic lifting and the programming around it and every little piece of it. I went to the World Weightlifting Championship as a spectator, to watch people do two movements, right? And it's kind of like somebody watching golf that doesn't golf. It's the perspective, you don't have an appreciation for it. But I found it fascinating. And I found myself gravitating towards wanting to work with more and more CrossFit athletes. So when I moved to Atlanta, I was going to a CrossFit gym. I was coaching at CrossFit gyms. I was working with Olympic weightlifting coaches, as their clients, trying to actually learn more about what was going on. And here's what happens. When you start to get involved into a niche, into a community of whatever that niche is, it's not that big of a community. I mean, they can be pretty big, right? If you have a number of runners in Atlanta where we live, for sure, there's probably a ton of them. But even still, people in those communities know each other. And when you start to be able to, be a part of those communities and not rush it, by the way, don't rush just joining a run group and then talking to everybody about why they need to be your patient afterward. Don't do that. You got to slow play this more than that. You have to be interested in the community before they're going to be interested in you and want to work with you and maybe even send other people your way. But if you can start to get involved, for me, working with a weightlifting coach, going to weightlifting competitions, going to CrossFit competitions, coaching at CrossFit gyms, going to CrossFit gyms and just being involved in the community for my own training, my own interests. And then these sidebar conversations that you start to have with people, they start to realize, oh, you're a physical therapist. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone to a dinner party or some sort of, get together and you're meeting new people and they say, oh, what do you do for a living? And you say, oh, I'm a physical therapist. And the next thing you know, they're showing you their hip or their wrist or their knee and they want to know why it hurts. It happens all the time. It's it's funny. Sometimes it's annoying, but it's also an interesting fact that everybody's hurt for the most part or their spouse is hurt. You might be saying, oh yeah, my wife's wrist has been bothering forever. Hang on, let me bring her over here. And then next thing you know, you're having a conversation with somebody. And if you can do that in the community that you are trying to develop a relationship with, let's just say CrossFitters, for instance, like what I did, all of a sudden you start to build a lot of credibility through knowing other people that maybe haven't even worked with you. They just like you because you're their bench press buddy on Mondays when you bench press at the gym. Like, that's how it works. You develop these relationships with common interests in a niche, and that leads to people having trust in you, even though maybe they shouldn't, or they don't know how good of a clinician you may or may not be. They just know you're interested in the same stuff as them. And that's half of the battle. Like, they have to like you and feel trust with you to be able to want to work with you or send people your way. So here's what you got to do. Define your niche, start getting involved in that community, and then take your time. Don't go for the, for the kill shot right away to try to get a patient, right? Be helpful, follow up with them. Slow play that to where they are asking you about how they can work with you. And then once that happens, you start to develop your rapport within that niche. That leaves you open to do many other things like injury screens and workshops and being able to do lunch and learns at these people you're going to meet at their companies and things like that, where you can do even more local marketing and build your business to a point where you are full-time within that. Because remember, if you're charging the right amount, you only got to get to about 10, 11, maybe 12 visits a week to be able to get to the point where you never have to work for someone else the rest of your life. And that's not a lot, especially if you're used to seeing, 12, 20, 30 people in a day. The volume of that versus the volume of what you're talking about in a cash practice is just tiny in comparison and much more sustainable. But the problem is you have to earn the right to be able to do that by understanding how to market, by understanding how to sell. This is the easiest, simplest, low stress option for you to start to market to where you don't have to worry about, like showing up random places and meeting people or figuring out ads or anything else, or posting on social media and making a video that maybe freaks you out a little bit. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is get involved in a community you like anyway, be a part of that community, be super helpful, and those people will come to you because you're going to be in the right place and interested in the right things. So guys, here's what I want you to do. Focus on those things. The niche, can you help them? Can they pay for it? Do you like working with them? Get involved in that community, and then take your time, slow play it, be able to get yourself to where you're at 100K a year, and then from there, you can go wherever you want. You can grow a 7-figure practice, you can keep it that way, you can make it a lifestyle business, but either way, this is the easiest, simplest strategy that you can do if you give it enough time and you really spend some time thinking about who you want to help and where you want to be involved. So, as always, thank you so much for listening to Caffeine and Cash Practices. I hope this helps. If you're interested in getting some more direct help from our company, Physical Therapy Biz, head to physicaltherapybiz.com and check it out for yourself, and I'll see you next week.